Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you both on.
Yeah,
thanks, Collin,
as well.
We're hyped to be here. Before we jump into, we're going to talk about some pretty cool pieces of like what we can do with Clay and how you can do these without using Clay. But we're going to talk about some really interesting ways of using AI in your prospecting, both for writing messaging and for targeting. Before we do that, we were having a bit of a complaint session before in the pre-interview when we were all kind of talking about episodic prospecting. I thought I'd just open us up with that because I think it's one of those things that if you've been doing this a long time, you get it, you see the impact. If you're new to it, it makes sense. Oh, I just need to prospect for a little bit because I only need a few customers. And so, Eric, I know this is, I think your kind of keyword, episodic prospecting. Tell me what it is, why you hate it.
Yeah, and so I don't think I can take total credit for it. It's kind of what the Clay team uses whenever people, we get this all the time. People say, your software is amazing. We love it. We got 1,000 leads. We're good to go. And we're like, what are you talking about? 1,000 leads is nothing. I hope that's not your whole market, because otherwise you should switch up your business plan immediately. But so episodic prospecting is, when you just prospect for a short time and you say, okay, yep, we're good to go. We did all of our prospecting work. We did all our research, and I'm going to go drip on these people. Maybe I'm going to send 1,000 emails, or I'm going to drip on the same people for a quarter, whatever it might be. And so that's kind of how we look at episodic prospecting. And I always, and the reason why it's such a big problem is people, you're right, they think, well, if I just do this, I'm just going to get this. And it's like, well, you're not thinking about churn. You're not thinking about when things go wrong. You're not thinking about, how many people are going to say yes to you, but then say, hey, this is awesome, but I need this 3 months later. Let's talk then, and we'll close the deal. And it kills your pipeline from there. And when you're building a business, the sales process always comes down to consistency. And it's just, how can you do the basic things every single day over and over and over again? And prospecting is the top of that funnel. I think the classic book all of us read, besides Predictable Revenue, if you haven't already read Predictable Revenue, the first one that opened my mind to it was Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt. And the big thing I got from that, I was my first sales job. I didn't even expect to be a salesperson. They kind of just put me in it. And he was just like, you'll never have commission breath as long as your pipeline's full. You just always know there's a next sale. And you just always know that somebody else is going to be there. And, being able to just do that consistently and taking time for prospecting and doing all of those things, because that's everyone's goal, is they want a predictable revenue pipeline, which, sometimes I put my fist in the air that you guys claim that name because it's just a stupid, everybody wants predictable revenue. You guys laid claim to that name, and that's all awesome for you guys. And that's what outbound prospecting can truly bring you. LinkedIn, they change their algorithm immediately. SEO and ads, all of the conversion rates are going to go to zero eventually, or somebody else is going to take your keywords, or it's going to be impossible. We will never rank for some keywords that we would love to rank for. But outbound prospecting is so important to do it consistently, because this is the channel that you can predictably say, okay, we need to send 1,000 emails, and we're going to get 50 meetings, and we're going to close 4 of them, and we could build a business off of that certainty. And so that's, I think, probably too long of a spiel of why I think episodic prospecting is ridiculous, and why you need to be doing it every single day to keep that top of your funnel full.
But the other thing is also that it's not just people who say they get 1,000 leads and they're done and we're worried about is that enough or not, but there are people who say, okay, we got 20,000 leads and we're good for the next 9 months. And the other problem there is that, well, the data is just going to decay so fast. And you may think these 20,000 people are in your ICP right now, but what if these people change their jobs? What if these people have companies that start falling apart? What if these companies grow and are hiring different people and that ICP change? What if the levers and the signals that you're using now to personalize aren't relevant again in 3 months when you're actually getting around to emailing them? And so that also is like, it's like friendly fire almost. Like you might be sending emails that might not make sense in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. And you need to keep that data fresh, and you need to be doing this on a much shorter, feedback loop.
100%. I think there's also people seem to underestimate when I'm new to things, it's the traditional, you're Dunning-Kruger. If I'm new to something, I think I'm like, okay, I understand the bits. I need to make phone calls. I need to send emails. If I talk to 1,000 prospects, I'll probably convert 5% of those into opportunities, right? Close one ops or whatever it is. The math seems really simple, and then you get into it. You're like, oh, it's not that simple. The number of people I've talked to, they're like, yeah, we just want to try something for 3 months. I'm like, why? I'll go to see if it works. It's like, well, how are you going to define if it works? Oh, if it creates close one opportunities. I'm like, okay, well, what's a typical sales cycle? Oh, 3 to 6 months. I'm like, so I needed to get prospecting 3 months ago for you to close a deal in this pilot. And you can kind of see it kind of resonating. They're like, okay, well, we just want to see some meetings. The thing that like kills me about people that just want to do like POCs is like you're paying for the worst part of the experience. There's no like the first 3 months of ramping an SDR is hard. There's tons of learning. And if all you're doing is like judging the quality of a program based on how quickly you get to that learning, right? Like, especially when it's a two-way street of like, ramping a new SDR takes time to train, find the right person. It's also a matter of like, from the leadership perspective, making sure we're going after the right people with the right messaging for the right reasons. It's the coming together of these two. There's a lot of risk in that. Nobody gets it right off the first try. Like, we've been doing this, we've done this for thousands of companies. Thousands, but at least 1,000 companies, hundreds of companies. And like, sometimes you hit it out of the park. Every time I tell a customer it's not going to work, they almost always close a deal in the first 3 months. It's like, haha, you were wrong. I'm like, yeah, okay. But there's just so much risk that happens. Like you spend so much time building the knowledge, building the experience, building the capacity, the capability to do this thing. You get up to the 6 month mark and you're like, okay, we've seen it, but it wasn't good enough. It's like, imagine training for a race. And then like you spend 3 months training for this race and then you're like, yeah, it wasn't fast enough. And you just don't run the race. Like, okay. Let's just not run anymore. Which I would agree with. The way running a race, I'm like, you run too much. Not because I don't want to, but it's just a lot of running. It's a lot of running, not a lot of purpose.
Yeah. I guess just like any comment to just go along with that is, in order to make a channel work, everything works. It's just, are you doing it correctly? Right. And nobody is going to be able to tell you correctly. Like, there could be Facebook ad gurus or cold email gurus or cold calling gurus of like, all these people are going to say, this is the way that you do it. But, until you just keep iterating on things. When I was much more focused on the agency that I worked for before Clay, there was a real estate fund that they wanted to raise money from cold email, and they were sure that it would be possible to do, and then we just could never get the emails out of spam. Like it was just because the keywords that get you into spam are like the same keywords that they need to say because there's really no other way to pitch their offer without like hiding something. And I think it was at like the 5 month mark that we were about to throw in the towel, and I was like, let's just try to throw an event. Let's just stop and just try to throw an event. And then we just kicked off an event campaign. We were saying, hey, we have a bunch of investors. It looks like you invest in things too. Do you want to come to the event? We'll do this. And then it got like 3 leads a day, like 3 meetings or like 3 event people a day. And it's like, oh, great. So now we came across something. So I definitely agree with you there that it is more of a marathon than a sprint if we're going to keep going with the running analogy.
Yeah, especially if you're looking for profitability, right, on these opportunities. Like I love looking at, what is the late stage pipeline? Great. Late stage pipeline, it can be hard to judge a demand gen channel by late stage pipeline alone if you're only looking at the channel. So much of it can depend on the AE. And like I was talking about meet, disco, manage, nurture. I don't want to go into the whole thing, but like you're booking meetings, how are you running your discovery call? And if they are running, they got a great process and they're doing a great job, awesome. If they're used to inbound leads that are like motivated and because they clicked on a thing and they've been researching it, they're ready to go. It's a very different experience from handling an outbound lead or an outbound meeting where it's like, we're reaching them out of the blue. We got to kind of push the rock up the hill a little bit. And then it's all about process and are you following your best habits and then your pipeline management process. And then really everything's setting up profitability wise to get to that nurture step where if you're not nurturing these people effectively, that's 80% of your revenue right there.
Yep.
So when we think about kind of the meat and potatoes that we want to talk about, we're talking about kind of that first booking meetings piece and to a certain extent, some of the ideas for nurturing these prospects. We're going to talk kind of through the lens of the prospecting, that kind of first 20% lens, but I think a lot of what we're going to get into applies for nurturing your prospects as well. In fact, I think when you do the pipeline management process correctly and you are marking things, it's saving your notes, it actually makes it way easier to add AI to the nurture steps because you've learned a whole lot more. You have more data, you can do more advanced things. We'll get into that maybe a little bit at the end. I want to talk first about targeting or messaging, because I think when I first started using Clay and AI and ChatGPT, I was like, oh my gosh, I can use this to write cold emails. And I've tried a bunch of tools and nothing really stuck. And what I found was I was spending more time using ChatGPT than if I was to like get the perfect message than if I were to just sit down and write it myself. And I think there are interesting things that you could do with it, and certainly taking, some snippets from Clay or some snippets from LinkedIn and things like that and having GPT kind of incorporate those as like custom variables, super interesting. But I wanted to get your opinion because I think having AI and having the ability to take AI and pull out pieces from the data and use that for targeting is going to have such a higher impact on a campaign because it's not if you're emailing the right people for the right reasons, what you say is not almost irrelevant, but is way less relevant. And so I think if you're emailing the right individuals at the right time for the right reasons, your messaging, it's not that it doesn't matter, but it matters a lot less. I'm curious, you two do this all day as well. What's your take?
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh no, you go, Varun.
Okay. We'll get a good vibe going as we do this podcast, as we go through this podcast. But I think that it's. I think you're right. I think you're right on where AI is right now. But on the targeting side, there's so much that you can do from a creative perspective to use AI. Like I can just think about some things that our customers were doing before GPT-3, GPT-4 were out. Like one example might be like figuring out the price of a company's product. It was such a clunky process to automate that, and really you kind of needed a VA to do a lot of that work because you had to do you had to look at the site map of a company's website, then you had to use a Google search to look at that specific page, that's the pricing page, and then you had to like do a keyword search on that page to see what it said, and hopefully you could find it in the snippet and extract it. It's like a whole thing and not a perfect science. And now you can do all of that work and have AI look at that page and tell you what's on it and cut that cycle pretty considerably. So if they have this type of pricing, that might make them a better candidate for you. Like if they are a product-led growth company, that might make them a better prospect for you, right? Or you could give it a lot of input. Like you could look and see, here are all the latest news about this company, and you could feed it GPT all of that news and be like, tell me something about this that would indicate that they're a better a prospect for me. So I think all that's super powerful. And I think Eric has done a lot of really great experimentation on taking snippets that he can talk about to using GPT-3 and GPT-4 to fill out specific snippets. But I think he's also found that it's not super effective at writing the whole email. So I think, and Eric, you should talk about this, right? Like how you've used it so far in automating our own outbound.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you're right. When it comes to AI, what I like to say, well, I don't actually think that I've said this part of using AI, but when I see so many salespeople using AI to write their messaging, I just think about it as exactly what you said. Like you're going to massage this thing forever until you actually get it to say something that you want it to say. And then even then, it's really not that great. Like, I know one person that they were saying, oh, I'm going to start posting on LinkedIn every single day, and I'm going to use ChatGPT to be able to get it. And they did it, and they got basically 0 results. I think the highest impression they got was 1,800 words. Not 1,800 words, 1,800 views. And the big reason why is because on LinkedIn, in order for you to be successful, you need to speak to something so niche and so valuable in order to get attention that there's no way that ChatGPT is going to have the context to say things, because you're going to have to talk from your own real world experiences, your knowledge, your insights, and AI just doesn't have all of those things. And so,
and it won't feel authentic either.
Yeah, and it won't feel authentic. And so then when you're cold emailing people, like, ChatGPT doesn't know the insights like you do about your customer. If it did, it would be giving your business secrets away to everybody, because essentially businesses are just arbitrages of knowledge when it gets down to it. And so if it knew everything about how to solve the problem for your customers, there would be probably nothing special about your company. So when you're sending this cold email, what's the most special thing that you could say in order to get somebody's attention? But then I think you're absolutely right so that aside of I think people, it should not lean on ChatGPT to write their entire email, because it just brings up a whole host of problems. 1, it's not authentic. 2, the content is very generic. And 3, it'll start hallucinating, and you have no control over what, at scale, you have no control of what comes out on the other side.
Totally.
But if you were to feed it data and say, hey, I have this data about this company, and I need you to infer things at scale about this, and then I need you to write content based on that inference, and now I take my cold email where 100 of the words are words that I am saying, and it's completely the same across every email, but 15 of those words were generated with AI. Those 15 words are going to make all of the difference, because it's going to make people feel much more seen and heard and all of those things. And we could talk about that in a little bit. But so as far as AI goes,
what that would look like.
This is what we're doing. And I've already announced it. Actually, this was the first time. I always tell Varun, because sometimes people will be like, Eric, this isn't going to work forever. You should keep this a secret. And I tell everybody, I'm like, I have no secrets when it comes to Outbound, because it feels like if I let the secret go, I'm not holding on to the same secret forever. And I'm not holding on to an attention hack forever. And I can start thinking about the next thing. But this was the first one that I was like, Varun, I don't think I want to tell anybody this. And
so it's predictable revenue exclusive.
Yeah. So what I discovered that you could do is I could give an input to ChatGPT of what a company does, and then with a lot of massaging and a lot of prompting, which is in the document that's going to be linked on this show, I was able to write creative, specific, and relevant outbound campaign ideas to prospects at scale without reviewing the text. I mean, I've reviewed 50 of them just to make sure, but I didn't review the text. Every idea was awesome. And we are sending cold emails to this day where what we're saying to people is, hey, I was checking out your website and it looks like you target blah, 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 because we'll just generate that as well. I'd imagine you're either running these outbound campaign ideas, or maybe some of these are new to you. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, and we would just give outbound campaign ideas. And the one that I checked Red Bulls, because I just wanted to make sure it would work on a B2C company as well, just in case we accidentally missed. And on Red Bull, it said target corporate executives to bring Red Bull on their corporate retreats to get everybody energized for the event. And then it said the second idea was target nightclub owners and teach them the interesting drinks that you can make with Red Bull. And then the third one was connect with sports organizations to make sure that Red Bull was at every sporting event. And I was like, awesome. So then we would send that email. It's just 1, 2, 3. And then we would end, hey, not sure if you're running any of these campaigns right now, but Clay can help you automate these things or start it for the first time if you've never done these things before. And that was probably the most high intent outbound campaign, outbound meetings that I've ever taken, of people who were like, yes, show me that. I just want to see that. And so yeah, that's what I would say about using AI to look at data, infer a decision, empower your messaging. And the framework was the same. It was a sandwich. There's no, I purposely, I'm not going to let ChatGPT write that part. But in between that sandwich is that awesomeness of wow, they really looked at my website. And I would talk to them. I'm like, did you know I did that with AI? And they're like, no. I'm like, all right, I'll show you how I did it. And so, Yeah, and so when it comes to generating inferences based on data, I would say that's probably the highest leverage thing. I at this point, and 6 months from now, I'll probably come up with something else. But at this point, I can't think of anything more high leverage than being able to speak to your prospect and say, hey, here would be the benefits personalized to you about using our product or service. And yeah, that's probably the most interesting thing we've done with AI so far.
Dang, that's pretty cool. Tell me a little bit about, and I want to go into some more examples. I'm curious before you get into the messaging, like what specifically are you, how are you using Clay, or what are you using to target them? Where you may be using AI to sort of infer that this company is a better fit or not a good fit for specific types of campaigns or sequences or plays, whatever you call them.
Whenever I'm talking to Clay users about this, I always ask them, when you're manually researching an account or a contact at an account, what's that thing that could be true about them that you would just, put your hands together and say, oh yeah, I'm going to reach out. This thing is true about them. I can't wait to reach out to these people. I'm going to email them. I'm going to cold call them. I'm going to send them a Yeti mug. Like, this is awesome. And then that's tier 1. And then what's tier 2? What's tier 3? What's tier 4? And then possibly you don't even have that many tiers. And then maybe you do. I'm setting up a campaign for Clay right now that has 9 tiers within it of things that we're going to check for. And so basically we can use Clay to check and see, okay, the most awesome thing that could possibly happen is if this company is launching a new product right now, that's our best message that we could possibly send to somebody, because we know they have these pain points X, Y, Z. And so then we would use the Predict Leads integration that we have within Clay to say, okay, look for new product launches. Once we get a new product launch, take the title, take the description, write an AI-generated message. Hey, congrats on your recent product launch, blah, blah, blah. Use keywords from the text and all of those things. Now, if that isn't true, let's go to number 2. Okay, so the next best thing is if they've recently hired a chief marketing officer. Awesome. If they recently hired a chief marketing officer, now that's number 2, and we're going to message to that instead of messaging to the new product launch. And then it keeps going down the line. Then if it's number 3 and they're hiring for a marketing role, that's kind of it, like in a director or above position, then we message that. And it just keeps tiering down. And so the AI always starts with the problem. And so what problem do you solve? What problem can you look for with data? And then the AI just, now that you see that problem, what text would you even write anyway? And then the AI will just take over.
Beautiful. I love how you're taking what I would do or what an SDR would do manually, and it's not just, this is not about necessarily even about the AI. It's about the sort of monitoring for these signals. And this isn't an ad. This is not a paid podcast. We just happen to use Clay. We really like Clay, so we wanted to highlight them. But we could just build these signals once, and then the sheet runs forever. And so if these turn out to be true, like this is why it's crazy to me that people would use Clay for a month, is that you would invest all this time building this sheet, and then you're like, okay, I don't need that anymore. And it's like, but you did the hard part, but not the easy part, which is just to let it run and let it automatically like monitor your target account list and feed them automatically into these campaigns and sequences and plays when they detect these signals.
Yeah, and I actually have a pretty hard set opinion on this, and I haven't had a person give me a good argument back. I really don't even think SDRs should be sending emails anymore. They're not that great at it. They're expensive. They're burning their domains. They're just not, it's not a efficient use of their time to hire a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month person to sit down and manually research, which I've talked to teams before where they were saying, okay, this is what we do. We pull 25 leads a day from Sales Navigator, and then we enrich them in sales intel for their email addresses. And then I go and check Google to see if they raised money. And I email them. I'm like, whoa. That's the whole thing? That's all you do? And then they were like, oh yeah. And I'm like, and so for this particular company, I said, okay, what if I could tell you that this company, they sell SOC 2 compliance automation? It's like, what if I could tell you that this company mentions that they're SOC 2 compliant? Or what if I could tell you that they're GDPR compliant before you even reach out to them? Oh yeah, that would be a great idea. Okay, well, so what if I could tell you the fundraising stuff and all of those things? But I'll do a Google search on top of their website to see if they mention any keywords around being SOC 2 compliant or GDPR compliant. And we're going to message to that instead. Okay, yeah, let's do that. And then with Clay, you can just load up accounts and do all that filtering. Nobody has to do the manual research. Nobody has to do all those things. And now you're not paying a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month person plus all their commissions and things to just send emails. And you could jockey the whole thing with a growth marketer, a RevOps person, a sales ops person who says, hey, we got email. We got this. You do the things that we can't do. Cold calling, LinkedIn posting, LinkedIn direct messages. We can't take those things over, but we got email now. And I still have not found anybody who says, well, I look for this thing and I can't automate looking for this thing. Because you can automate looking for that thing.
But it's like what you both are getting at is that it's also like most people are not thinking this critically about their ICP. Like, I think most people think of their ICP as like a Series B company with 200 employees and like the head of RevOps or something. Like that's basically the extent to what people think their ICP is. And that's just not the standard anymore. Maybe that was the standard of 2013, but that's not the standard anymore. And the standard is so much more granular. So the problem isn't that people do episodic prospecting and that people use Clay for a month and leave because they're doing episodic prospecting. The problem is that people are not thinking critically enough about what their ICP is and being super granular about it and looking at their existing customers and their closed won deals and identifying the common denominators and the key signals and indicators that might make better customers to inform future behavior on their outbound.
For those of you listening on audio, I couldn't stop shaking my head yes, because that's absolutely true. And before we even started this, Collin and I were saying, people just don't have good ideas anymore. Like that's the real problem, is most people just don't have good ideas about what they should be doing.
I mean, it's hard too, right? Like defense for, the sales manager who's got, 2 SDRs, 3 SDRs, 2 AEs, a couple of account managers, like that individual has a very broad role. I empathize with that person because, like, just to get, Apollo, Outreach, Salesforce, et cetera, like all that set up is like a full-time job. To build your process for how do you prospect, how do you do this, how do you do that is a full-time job. To build the process for how do you close, how do you, how are you running a demo, right? How are you running a discovery call? How do you navigate? How do you choose when? Like, it's a super broad role. And I think one thing that we've seen in the last few years is that, like, to your point about even email deliverability, I remember having a fight with our CTO and I was like, hey, this is your department. He's like, no, it's not code. I'm not touching it. I don't understand email deliverability. And I was like, but it's zeros and ones. Like, you should know this. You should figure it out. He's like, nah, this is a soft skill for you salespeople. Go figure it out. And like email deliverability, who in an organization touches that? I think everything within the sales is you have these very general, like broad people with very broad roles because it's kind of sales manager can be kind of a catch-all. And it's really hard to have that very, very specific deep knowledge on email deliverability or AI or, how to do this. And so people don't necessarily have the time to think and develop. Like I think of these things all the time, but I also had the luxury of being a salesperson for 10 years and then starting a tech company and having 2 tech companies grow and fail on me. Like that's incredible experience that hurts when I think about it too much, but it was like Founder University. And in that time, like I made so many mistakes around not talking to customers and not understanding like how like deeply who my real ideal customer profile was that like, yeah, unless you're in those positions, when you get to learn this stuff.
That's true. And to also stick up, and I agree with a lot of those things, but to also stick up for the SDRs as well, they're not really incentivized to do this. They're incentivized to do their 10 meetings and they want to get on a fast track to get to the big leagues and close real deals and be an account executive. And their tenure just is really not that long to be an SDR and to really get good at SDRing. They basically all are incentivized to one day become an account executive. And there's not a whole lot of compounding knowledge that gets put into the role within the organization.
Mm-hmm. It's also a challenging role. Like I totally
That's true.
There. Yeah. I was trying to think like who is the Clay ideal user? Is it an SDR? Probably not. Is it a sales manager? Probably not. Is it a RevOps person? Maybe, but probably not. So like, yeah, what is that?
We do best with the Rev. I mean, we actually have several like personas at this point. I think like the different personas are basically a RevOps person at a later stage company, and they have a sales team, and they're the ones doing all the orchestration, and they can orchestrate all of these tables and outbound flows for the whole team, and then the team just throws in data and it runs on repeat. And so that's like a great system. We also have like a ton of early stage startups where the founder or like the first sales or marketing hire is doing a lot of the outbound for the whole company, and they're running it all on Clay, and they get sort of the power of a full team with just one person. And then we have tons of growth agencies, right? Like Predictable Revenue, like Eric's, like lots of other agencies. And then we have this like burgeoning group of recruiters who are really excited about using Clay in a recruiting use case. It's not something we've really focused on or supported too much, but there's a lot of excitement there. So those are the kinds of different users right now and the different personas.
Interesting. I do want to, and I apologize for the detour. I didn't mean to go there. It was just more of a curiosity, and that's just the way I run the show. Is just if a question pops up, I'm going for it. So, we talked a lot about the targeting element. We talked a little bit about some of the ways that you're stacking these creative ideas for targeting into a prospecting campaign. I'd love to, Eric, your perspective on like what is the best, and Varun, yours as well. What's the best use case for AI in a prospecting sequence?
In my opinion, the best use case for AI is, like I said, being able to take a look at data, analyze the data, make an inference about data, and then change the way you're doing your copywriting in snippets. Not the whole email. Don't try to boil the ocean here. Get that snippet right to really speak to the problem and the relevance of what your product and your service can do for somebody.
Yeah. Do you want to, like even yesterday we were on with those recruiters, and they were blown away by just like looking at, by giving them a very specific prompt about, hey, like I saw your latest experience and you were doing X, Y, and Z, and the AI was really good at like taking the latest the summary on a LinkedIn profile from the latest experience and taking that as input and then turning that into like 6 words basically that encapsulate or really capture what they did in that job, and is so specific that and authentic that it feels like someone actually wrote that.
That's amazing. I will link to the 22 personalizations blog post article that Eric wrote. I'm curious, what were some of your highlights there? Because what they can expect in this article is these are snippets these are the actual prompts that you used to build the personalization for each of these sequences, correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. What I really want to do is to teach people the framework that I have discovered to prompt artificial intelligence to truly make inferences based off of data and not just give you attention hacks. And so I include attention hacks because sometimes you need to meet people where they are, but I think the best thing you could do is write relevant messaging. And so quickly, before we get into that, the difference is an attention hack is if I reach out to somebody and I say, oh, hey, Collin, I noticed you're based in California, or in like, I'm so sorry, where are you based in? Vancouver. Yeah. Okay. Hey, notice you're based in Vancouver. Have you ever tried this restaurant? I've heard really good things about it. That's just an attention hack. That has nothing to do with solving a problem. It has nothing to do with your product or service or anything. But if you read that, an unsuspecting person would say, oh, wow, they actually wrote this email to me. This doesn't work on SaaS founders. It just doesn't work on e-com founders because they see this stuff all the time. But if you email an accountant in Vancouver, they will never know the difference. You totally get them. And so that attention hack will increase your conversion rate. But I don't think that they're the first things that you should be using. And I even talk about it in the blog that your top level thing how could you use AI to make an inference about a relevant reason why they should be taking a look at your product or service. And so besides the like outbound campaign ideas, for recruiters, I've developed GPT prompts for them where we could take a look at the mission of the company. Well, we could take a look at the description of the company. All of this can start from the description of the company and who they're hiring for and say, okay, this is the description of the company. What's the mission of the company? Okay, they're hiring for a software engineer. What problems do software engineers solve? Okay, now that we have this problem and we have this mission, how does solving this problem complete this mission? And so now we can create a line that recruiters are reaching out to people with and saying, oh, hey, like I noticed you're hiring for a software engineer. Typically, I see people hiring for software engineers when they want to improve their product and, reduce their technical debt in order to fulfill your mission of whatever your company does. And then we could also use AI. I don't even know why I didn't mention this one, to infer from the job description of what would make this person a good candidate, and say, after we say that line, we would say, oh, hey, I looked at the job description. It looks like you're looking for somebody who can accomplish these things. 1, 2, 3. I have a couple of candidates in mind. Do you think this would be a fit? Whoa. That message compared to, hey, I saw that you're hiring for an account executive, parentheses, German territory, would love to see if you need anybody placed. Like that, the difference between those two messages is night and day. And so I really want people to start thinking about artificial intelligence as the tool that can infer this data for you and empower your messaging. And the framework that I use is, and I'm just going to go over one I basically have memorized now because I do it so often, is if we're looking to write a first line about just what the company's mission is, right? Because sometimes this is just a fallback line that I teach people, just because if you have nothing else, no other better ideas, that this is just a good way to personalize the email. And our result is going to say, hey, I was taking a look at your website and it looks like you help people build predictable revenue, whatever, like the generated text after that. And the way you get that line is you say, using the input, complete my prompt with the mission of the company. This is the input. And then usually we input the company description from LinkedIn because it's static. It's not that long. Usually it's a pretty good synopsis of what the company does. So we usually input the company description from LinkedIn. And then I say, keep the output under 8 words and use specific keywords from the text. Complete each prompt with my prefix. This is my prefix. I was on your website and it looks like you help. All of that, there's 4 parts to that. There's first where I'm stipulating, hey, there's going to be an input here, and this is what I want you to do with the input. Using the input, tell me what the mission of this company is. Then you need to stipulate your input. This is the input. And then I usually put that in quotes just so that it's like very sure that GPT understands what I'm doing here. Then the third part is putting guardrails on everything. I like to tell people, I'm not sure if this analogy is landing, but I keep telling people it, that, AI is like a 5-year-old at a bowling alley. There's no chance of making a strike. Absolutely zero. Never going to happen. Mm-hmm. Give it enough equipment, though, some guardrails, help it push the ball, like it'll hit a strike every time. But yeah, it needs a lot of help. And so then you tell it, keep the output under 8 words. We got to stay in control of that length and use specific keywords from the text. I don't want you going off and saying generic. Almost said a bad word there. I don't want you saying generic stuff on Make It Square. Okay. I don't want you saying generic stuff in here. Use specific keywords from the input so they feel like it's actually sent to them. And then I always include a prefix. And I include a prefix because if you don't include the prefix, you have no clue what it's going to say. And you're not in control of how it's going to fit into your copywriting. So I always say complete the prompt with my prefix. This is my prefix. And then I stay in control of that and say, hey, I was on your website and it looks like you help people. Because then it's always going to complete that because it knows how to complete that sentence over and over and over again. And so I hope people pick up on that pattern, which it's at the very top of the blog, that pattern, because I just see so many people. Varun and I were at a demo with somebody. I'm definitely not going to name them. But they prompted ChatGPT and they said, hey, we help people with their financial reporting. Write a personalized email to this person. This is their first name and this is their email address. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. Yeah. I was like, wow, that's not even close. Like that will not get you anywhere. And so I think one day, to be completely honest, there was a guy that I saw who he asked ChatGPT to build a business that would get to $1 million within like 2 years on a $100 budget. And it gave some pretty dang good advice. It was like an e-commerce business and all of these other things. One day, I think GPT will be big enough that you could start genuinely entire companies and just prompt it through everything. And it'll say, do this, do this, do this, write this copy. Here's how you run the Facebook ads and like do all these things. I think we're not that far away from it doing that. But today, you gotta keep it on a short leash because it's going to start hallucinating and do crazy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your bowling alley analogy, I have 5-year-olds. If you said, hey, go bowl a strike, and you put them at the top of the stairs at the bowling alley. I'm thinking of one particular bowling alley I've been to. You know, they're just like, they're at the entrance. They're like, if they don't know what bowling is, I mean, ChatGPT probably knows what bowling is, but the context is like, it doesn't know what a cold email is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a deep understanding of the predictable revenue methodology and fanatical prospecting. And
but soon you can feed it all of that. Like right now there's a limit on the like number of tokens, but like when it increases to hundreds of thousands, like 32,000 tokens or something, like you could just feed it, hey, here is the predictable revenue book, like learn it, and then like write emails based off that methodology. And that's pretty powerful. I think like people, yeah, like it's to build on what Eric was saying, it's, you know, there's a thing in marketing where like when you're working on landing pages, you know, you can change the copy, you can change the design a little bit, but ultimately those are just optimizations. And at the end of the day, what's going to drive your conversion the most is like, what are you actually offering? And is it like super valuable? And similarly here, like, yeah, you can change the copy in an outbound email. You can do this, you can do that. You can add an attention hack like the restaurants, and maybe that'll increase the conversion a little bit. But ultimately, it's just an optimization. And then at the end of the day, the core is the value. And like, you can now use AI to actually generate value in a really unique way. And you can have it do work for your end customers even, right? And you can give them ideas, and you can have it generate value in unique ways that people aren't really tapping yet. And so that, I think, is like a thing that'll move the needle much more dramatically.
Totally. I love and I think you're totally right. The ability to feed it more and more and more, like GPT-4 increased that pretty significantly. And there are probably other improvements or at least capacity pieces coming in the next year or two. Big time. And so when we come back to the framework here, you start with giving it the guardrails, telling it where it is in the bowling alley, giving it the pieces of data it needs to infer to make these inferences, and then pulling it all together. Is that the whole framework there, Eric, start to finish?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
And so help me understand I want to come back to the example at the beginning. You mentioned that you were, for Clay, you're doing these prospecting email examples, right? So you're coming up with the email campaigns you're coming up with email campaign plays, sequence ideas for potential Clay customers that you're doing called the email outbound. Walk me through kind of step by step the kind of what you did, what you're pulling in. And I know we kind of went through it a little bit at the beginning, but I think with the context of this framework, it's another helpful example.
Yeah. And so, user comes onto a demo, and first thing I ask them is, what are we selling and who are we selling it to? Say, oh, okay, we sell XYZ software, and we like to sell it to these people. And everybody always gives me too generic of an answer. They're always like, I sell to chief marketing officers with 50 to 150 employees. I'm like, that's not true, but we'll talk about that pretty soon. We'll get there. And so then I always ask that question. Hey, when you're manually researching this stuff, where do you, clap your hands and start cheering that you found a little tidbit that is perfect? And so we basically start pulling in the generic ideal customer profile first from LinkedIn data, or maybe they have another data source or whatever it might be. We could scrape it from LinkedIn. We could use a source of LinkedIn, Phantom Buster, wherever you want to pull this stuff in. And that generic ideal customer profile is, like I said, chief marketing officers of 50 to 100 employees, and they're in SaaS or something like that. And so then we start with that list, and then that question really becomes relevant of, okay, what are we researching for here? What makes them an awesome fit? And that's when I start showing them, okay, we have their LinkedIn profile, we have their email addresses, now the world is your oyster. And then we just start problem sniffing, and we just start saying, okay, how do you know that somebody has this problem? Whether it's job boards, it's news, it's content on their website, it's integrations that they don't mention, integrations they do mention, technographics, employee headcount growth. You could really name it. There's so many things that you can base this off of. And then we just walk through the process of, okay, if they, and then there's basically two things that happen. Either they are a golden fit prospect that you could basically send the same message to all of these people because they just fit so well. And that's like, I guess I'll call that right fit messaging, where, hey, you just match what everybody else looks like. You're a CMO, 50 to 100 employees at a SaaS company. You're hiring for a graphic designer. You have 3 people working underneath you. You're trying to add more. All these people are new. They just joined in the last 6 months. Just right fit for everything. And then, so there's right fit prospecting, and then there's trigger-based prospecting, where now somebody just recently announced that they're launching a new product, and now it's like, oh, okay, we want to talk about that because this trigger is perfect for us. Or a CMO just recently came in and they're less than 3 months in the job. Trigger-based prospecting. And so basically we just walk them through, okay, is it right fit or is it trigger? Usually triggers, you're 100% mentioning them in the email. Right fit, you might not always be mentioning them in the email because you might just have messaging that you put together that if they're this right fit, you just say this thing and it just works. You don't have to mention any of the reasons why they're a right fit. But sometimes you still put right fit into the messaging. And so then I'll show them, how do you inject it into the messaging? How can we get this ready for, exporting as a CSV or sending straight to your CRM, whichever one it might be. And that's kind of the path I take them through. Curious if Varun has a different way he takes them.
No, I think that largely that tracks. I think that's like the same framework that I kind of follow, and just getting people to think creatively about the inputs that they have and where like the branches of possibilities that it could lead to is kind of the unlock that I'm going for.
Love that. The one thing I always struggle with, especially when you're going from like LinkedIn, universe is this big, but every time I've done a LinkedIn search, no matter what tool I'm using, whether I'm clicking around, in the early days, I like manually copy and pasted so much on LinkedIn. I got banned because they thought I was a bot. I was just really good with hotkeys. Like I genuinely had to write a letter to LinkedIn because I got banned. It was like I got 3 bans in a 24-hour period. And the first one, it was all from like one wave of prospecting I did where I was like copying and pasting and I was sending a message in the connection request. This is like OG LinkedIn, like 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago. And the first wave, people were like, this is spam. This guy's a jerk. I was like, yeah, that's probably right. But like people are responding, so it's great. And then I got auto banned and then I clicked the like, okay, yeah, sorry I did that button. And it unlocked my account, but people were still waiting to hear back, or people still hadn't read all my messages. And so I got this other wave of like, once I was unlocked, I was like basically locked up right again.
Right, Dan, yeah.
And then I messaged somebody and they're like, okay. Like I had to get into their support chat. Anyway, long story short, I ended up having to write a letter. Every time I've like, I'm sorry, LinkedIn, I won't do it again, this and this and that. I love LinkedIn. However, every time I do a search, it seems like there's a hard limit of about 1,900. You do a search for 900 or 1,000 prospects, and when you actually pull it out, there's like 682 or 942 or whatever it is. It's like 66% of the actual number that they give you. So how do you slice that bread? How do you filter the things down? So if you start with a universe of, 100,000 target accounts on LinkedIn, how do you get it down to 1,000 per search?
Yeah. So the first thing, a quick hack. If you ever get your LinkedIn account banned, reach out to Twitter support because Twitter cares. Whoever is running Twitter support, they'll actually fix the problem for you for some reason on their LinkedIn company page. The people on the actual customer support side, they don't care.
It's very hard to get customer support.
But if you reach out to the marketing team on Twitter, they love people. Like they'll respond for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway. And so
it's also just like a mystery, by the way. It's just a mystery to me why LinkedIn is so inaccurate with their own data. Like it's their data. In theory, they should be able to own it and like slice and dice it any way they want. And for some reason, it's mind-boggling to me that they haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that like if you put on if you say this person changed jobs in the last 90 days, 1,000% in the first 25, you're going to see somebody who's been at a job for 10 years, 100%. And it's like crazy that they can't figure that out. But yeah, so if you are stuck on a tool like ZoomInfo or Seamless or Apollo or LeadIQ where they're charging you per credits and you have an account list of 10,000 companies and it's all on LinkedIn and all of the data is up to date because everybody else is scraping LinkedIn, right? And so like, you might as well go straight to the source because they figured it out too. But you're absolutely right. There are limits to how many profiles that they're going to show you at any given time that you'd be able to scrape for. And so this method that we have of quote unquote slicing the bread is basically creating LinkedIn Sales Navigator searches that you split up the search so that you can get access to your whole total addressable market without having to pay the upsell of that Zoom Info is going to charge you and all of these different things. And so basically, you first have to determine what is the most important thing for your search. And it might be, I want every company that has 100 to 200 employees and they are in the hospital and healthcare industry. And that is my requirement. They have to be, and they're in the United States. That is what we have to do. And so then you just look at the rest of the search filters. So then you basically look at the rest of the search filters and say, okay, what can I play around with here that I can reduce this search from 8,000 accounts? And how could I get this number under 1,000 without changing my main search? So we can't touch employee headcount. We can't touch headquarters location. We can't touch industry. And I don't use account searches all the time, so I'm running out of filters that we can filter on. But what we could do is, instead of looking at the entire United States, we could look at just New York State. Oh, now we look at New York State. We've got 800 results. All right, let's save that, put it in your little spreadsheet, and get ready later. All right, now we combine the Midwest, right? And we get Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Idaho, all those into one. And now you have 12 hospitals. No, I'm kidding. And now you get, 600 accounts that fit your criteria, right? Save that link, put it into your spreadsheet. And basically you keep slicing the spread in ways that don't affect your overall search, and everything is still true about the companies, but it doesn't matter the way that you're breaking it up. And you can access your whole target addressable market by doing that. Load up either the Clay Chrome extension where you could scrape this out inside of Sales Navigator, or tools like Phantom Buster that are going to use your LinkedIn cookie to pull this stuff out. Do it slow so you don't get banned, but then you could get access to your whole target market without paying these crazy upsells from these other companies.
Or LinkedIn could just make this process easier.
Which they will never do.
Yeah. No. Yeah. The LinkedIn data, is strange to me as well, but I've also worked on a data product. And I remember just the extreme complexity of doing base calculations that just seemed like, I can do this in a spreadsheet, no problem. But then the more I understood about the problem, the more I was like, okay, I really don't understand the problem. It seems like a very basic thing. You got a table, you got a column, count how many instances are in that column. And I'm sure in some cases it's that simple, but you start joining data,
That gets
updating data, updating stats, and the scale that they're at, trying to keep all that data up and all those counts up. They're not doing those counts.
It's like a billion
That's
bits.
nice, Yeah. So yeah, and all of the the whole graph that they have on a single user is crazy, and to merge all that together. And so I think what's probably happening is they're showing you cached stats, and something has changed, or it's I don't know, it's not a guess, but anyway, yeah, we don't need to go too deep into this. Thank you for sharing your slicing the bread analogy. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about one thing we haven't really gotten into. We talked about pulling data from LinkedIn. We've talked about signals. I haven't really talked about Google. So I'm curious, how do you use Google and Google Maps to prospect?
Oh, Google is probably the most powerful weapon you have next to artificial intelligence. And if not, it's probably even better than artificial intelligence, because this could feed so much data into your artificial intelligence. Google is sitting on top of all of the information of the world, basically. And the way that you could use it is you can use specifically Google search operators to automate a lot of the research that you would normally do, but now you could do it at scale. And so Google search operators are basically, they're basically either pieces of text or just punctuation that you can tell Google very specific searches that you're searching for. So earlier in the podcast, I was talking about how can we check if a company is GDPR compliant or SOC 2 compliant. So if a company is GDPR compliant, they're going to put in their privacy policy, data processing addendum is the keyword that they're going to be putting in. And we could create a Google search and we could say site, SITE, gong.io. And at this point, what I'm telling Google is I want you to only return results if the content is from gong.io. Okay. Space, quotations, data processing addendum, and you put it in there. And now I'm saying I'm only looking for results from gong.io, and I only want a page that mentions data processing addendum. And so now if results come back, they mention data processing addendum on their website. If results don't come back, that means they don't mention data processing addendum, and they don't have the keywords that would make them that means that they are compliant with GDPR. And that's even just a basic use case of this, but that's how you could use Google at scale, where like anytime people are doing research on websites, I'm always asking like, you're looking for a thing. What's the thing? I'm like, well, I want to see if they are an e-commerce store, but I don't want them to be direct to consumer. I want them to be a wholesaler. Oh, okay. So you're looking for the keyword wholesaler on the website. Yeah. Okay. Site, Gymshark.com, in quotes, wholesaler. Yeah. And then you're good to go.
Eric and I have also worked with like 2 separate software companies that have done something pretty neat with this, that use Google twice in different ways. And one, they're using Google to basically find the documentation page on a company's website, and they like and they'll just do a site search to find the documentation page. And once they find the documentation page, they do a keyword search using Google on that page to mention, do they have a documentation article about CSV software, about like CSV, like do they mention the word CSV in it? And if someone has basically built a documentation page about CSV or something, or about any other problem that they might have, like PDF import is another one that people have done on this, then there's software companies for PDF importing and for translating PDFs into text and doing CSVs more easily. They're like, oh, well, clearly it's a problem for this business because they've gone to the lengths of actually creating a page on their documentation website about this topic. And so that's like a super creative way of like, here's like an interesting signal about this business that would indicate that they really need our product. But that's the type of creativity we want people to do. And the other thing is on Google Maps, which we were asking about, which is like the best way, bar none, to find local businesses. And there's there are just so many companies out there that are vertical SaaS companies that are basically, software for dance studios, software for bowling alleys, software for jewelry stores, software for barbershops. And with Google Maps, you basically can make this search and say, I want to find all the jewelry stores in Tempe, Arizona, get a list of them. Already you have like their phone number, their website, the number of reviews they have, whatever. And then you get that in Clay, you add in like their Yelp reviews, whatever, you scrape their website to see if there's anything. This is also great for private equity companies who are like constantly trying to buy these types of small businesses. And then you try to find their owner and get their email. And that's like a really creative way. There's not really another data source that outside of Google Maps that actually is so canonical when it comes to these local SMBs.
Huh. Man, I remember, I won't say who it was or what we were doing, but one of our customers was like, here's my Columbus Public Library card, and I want you to go through they had like a business database in there for like local businesses. And we did the math on what it was going to take to like either human scrape it or like scrape it with an API. And it was like, dude, I think we worked out it was like 176 human days of scraping. And I was like, I will never find anybody who's going to commit to doing that for 176 days straight. But that solves it. I wasn't thinking about that. Oh man, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, because people all the time, any company in SaaS or many other industries, if they don't have a LinkedIn profile, it's probably not even worth reaching out to them, because if they don't even have that together, then it's fine. But if a plumber doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, okay, that's kind of normal. Great thing about Google Maps is if a plumber doesn't have a Google Maps profile, I don't even want to reach out to them either, because it's like, you haven't figured that out yet, unless I'm a person who's building Google Maps profiles for plumbers, which, yeah, that's a really tough place for you to be in. But we have found, working with our customers, that basically between LinkedIn data and Google Maps data, when it comes to account research, you could basically get everything done that way.
For those people that are not on YouTube, Collin's mind was just blown.
I mean, I've used the LinkedIn thing in Clay a whole bunch before. I at one point professed to be a Google search operator master. But I've never used it at scale like this. I haven't tried it in Clay yet. So that's the thing that I'm like, if I'm pausing at all in this episode, if I've been pausing, I'm like, oh man, I'm either thinking like how I'm going to do this. I'm like letting my brain readjust to this new paradigm, or I'm wondering how nobody's ever asked Eric if he was on Parks and Rec, because he kind of reminds me of Chris Pratt.
There are other things. I don't know if that's a compliment, Eric, but
I think so.
because there are a couple of other like crazy things you can do with Google too. Like, recruiters use Google all the time to do X-ray searches on LinkedIn or GitHub or whatever to find the right people, because Google indexes LinkedIn arguably better than LinkedIn indexes itself. And so there's really, really precise searches that you can do with X-ray searching on Google that are really powerful to find candidates. And then also you can use Google to search companies' websites for like their 10K or like PDF documents. And like you can, in Clay, use Google as a source and be like, I want to know like all of the companies that actually have this PDF thing on their website, And so that's another creative thing that you can do.
Tell me more about using LinkedIn or Google to search LinkedIn with advanced operators. This is something I've done, but I'd love to hear. I think you've probably done it more recently.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
So basically, the key is like you have all these different criteria on about a company's profile, and so these queries can get really, really, really long. But it gives you so much more flexibility and precision in what you're looking for. And so recruiters really like this because their queries are pretty specific, especially if they're doing like tech recruiting and stuff like that. So not only is it the basic stuff around education and location and things like that, that you could even go with basic LinkedIn filters, but it's the keywords like Java or Ruby on Rails or whatever it might be that they might mention in their profile, and getting really precise about that. And there are websites like recruited.net and a couple of others that'll actually let you do this and without having to know all of it. You can just put in the criteria there and it'll just spit out like a Google operator search for you. And so that's kind of the use case and why recruiters, especially like the best sourcers, really try that as opposed to just searching on LinkedIn directly.
That's recruited.net?
Yeah.
I'll throw a link in the show notes. Wow, that's neat. It just throws your, and then it pulls, it automatically sets up the Boolean for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Awesome. I want to keep going here. I want to find a good spot to land this. I'm curious about, Eric, Varun, I heard your piece on the search operators. Eric, what's one of your favorite Google Maps searches that you've run either for yourselves, for a customer, and then we'll go to Varun, and then we'll kind of bring this all together.
Google Maps searches. I feel like I don't do it that often. I just helped. You know what? I'm going to shout them out because I would love for them to become a customer, and they accepted all of my LinkedIn requests, and then they just never talked to me again, even though I built the whole table for them and everything. If you know a person named Cody Sanchez, she runs a company called Unconventional Acquisitions, and they basically teach people how to buy businesses, hopefully no money down out of your own pocket, and then they just, they educate people how to do that. And I was listening to her, and she wants to acquire property management businesses. She loves property management businesses, but the biggest thing about these property management businesses is they have to be property management businesses for Airbnbs. And it's like, whoa, how do you make that search? And so if you search for property management Airbnb, you will get more blogs than you will get actual results. And so this is a perfect situation where you actually get super meta about this stuff. And you actually have to do a Google Maps scrape, and then you have to do a website scrape to be able to get this. So what you have to do is you have to spin property management searches. You could put Airbnb in the keywords, but it's really not going to get you all of the ones that are there. There was a huge bump when I just did property management. So you search like property management in Miami, and you get all of these results. And then you search property management in LA and then Nashville, blah, blah, blah. You get all these results. Now you've got this list of property managers that you could actually work with that you got locally. But then you do a Google search on top of their website to see if they mention keywords of Airbnb on their website, and I don't know how else to build that list. I truly, I'm thinking it, I'm not even sure how else. Yeah, manually you would build that list. I can't think of a better way to build that list. But for us, now with that list built, I could find them another 600 companies in 3 clicks on Clay, because I would just have to add more data as a source, and then all of the workflow is already done. It's already all filtered out, and I could send it to a Google Sheet and just, send it straight to Cody, who is ignoring my messages. But that's fine. I'll figure it out.
We'll send her this this podcast be a pitch.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Send us a clip. We'll clip it.
Yeah, we'll clip it. I will send it to Cody. Yeah.
100%. Varun?
Yeah, I'm actually going to choose something that is not a B2B use case and is kind of out there a little bit. It's actually a personal use case. I was at dinner. This happened a couple months ago. I was at dinner with a few friends, and a couple of the women were pregnant, and we were talking about, being pregnant in New York, and I mean, not that I'm pregnant, obviously, but they were
Going to say anything.
Yeah, they were talking about the logistics of things, and they were saying that the cool thing to do, the smart thing to do, is working with an OBGYN who has admitting privileges at Cornell Weill, because it's the only hospital in New York that I think you get your own private room when you're giving birth, which feels like an important thing to have during the delivery process. But they were like, how do I find the OBGYNs in New York who even have that as an admitting privilege? And I was like, wow, this is a Google Maps opportunity. And so I did a search on Google Maps, and I was like, I want to find all the OBGYNs in New York. So I got like a list of, however many hundred of OBGYNs in New York. I pulled the website from Google Maps. I also got the Google reviews, which I think is like a pretty helpful, review thing. And then one of our friends told me about like this website called healthgrades.com. And so that's another place where you can get like reviews of these of these doctors. And so I did a Google search for the health grades. Harris Kenny actually told me about that, Eric. And then
Cool.
I did a Google search for healthgrades.com, got the ratings from healthgrades.com to also complement the Google reviews to get a good picture of who are the best OBGYNs, period. Then I did a Google search on the OBGYN's website for the keywords Cornell Weill, because they will advertise the hospitals that they have admitting privileges with, because this is a criteria for selection for the doctor. And then finally, these friends only wanted to see an OBGYN who was a woman, which also makes sense. And so we have like this API with this company called Genderize. And so I took Genderize and I ran it on the people's names and was like, tell me if this is a woman or a man. And then filter the list for the women OBGYNs with a certain health grades review and a certain Google review, and mentioned Cornell Weill on their website.
That is amazing. You were either like the greatest, most Swiss Army knife internet friend of the entire world, or the most boring dinner guest ever. I could totally see myself going in and just like, I'm going through it. I'm like mapping it out like Rain Man on his chalkboard or whatever. And people are like going on with the conversation, and I'm deep into thought.
Like, I'm the type of person in that dinner to like pull out my laptop from the backpack and just like do it now, and like, I don't think that's the vibe for other people, but that's my vibe.
I love that. And how did it go? Did they give it?
We used it. I think they used it. Yeah.
What do you think, Chris? Did you do a great job? Chris Pratt.
Oh, gee, I was like,
Eric was lost there for a moment.
I was totally lost. I was like,
how did you forget my name?
And my name is right there on Zoom. So yeah.
Wow, I'm blown away. Thank you both for coming on. Where can we find? Well, I'll throw a link to the 22 personalizations post in the show notes here. Anything else that they should check out that we talked about today? I'll also throw that link to recruitin.net.
Yeah, that was helpful. I think there's a ton of great content that Eric and others on our team have written on the blog. Sign up for the wait list. Just mention predictable revenue or something, or emails for that, and we'll skip you from the wait list, so you can use Clay. But yeah, just get excited. And you can also like join our Slack. It's just clay.com/Slack, and you can talk to like a bunch of really smart people, smarter than us, about prospecting and stuff like that. And that's like a really useful place where you can learn tips and interesting things. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Love it. Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I'll just add on, if you are a founder or a salesperson, or if you're just trying to sell, I bet most of what you're doing today manually can be automated, and you just need somebody to tell you that it can be automated, because that's what happened to me. Is I didn't know that these things could be automated. And as soon as I found out that I could, it just put me down this crazy rabbit hole. So I guess I would just end with that, if you're questioning if your process could be automated, it probably can be. And, whether you use Clay or you're using other tools to get it done, like, go enjoy some beach time. Automate this stuff and hit the beach.
You mentioned earlier hesitation around sharing your best secrets. We had a similar reservation about talking about Clay on the podcast or having you guys on, because it's been a game changer for us at Predictable Revenue in terms of basic things like being able to a client gives you a list of company names. They're like, hey, can you prospect these? I'm like, sure, but you got to get somebody to manually go and like, even that basic use case. Like, I love Clay. It gives me, not only it saves me time because I don't have to pay somebody to go and click around in Google, but I genuinely get to do things that I couldn't do before. And so working with Clay on behalf of clients, using that to kind of implementing it, and yeah, it's just been super fun. The hardest thing about a tool, whenever you're looking at a tool, whether it's Zoom Info or Slack or Outreach or Apollo, is trying to figure out, will this actually work for me? And so if you're thinking, is Clay cool? Is it going to work for me? Hop into their Slack and be like, hey, can I do this? And you guys have like the greatest, most responsive support Slack people of any Slack community I've been a part of. So huge shout out there. Thank you both for coming on the show. I'll throw you a link to
having us
in the show notes. If anybody wants to get in touch or has questions, reach out. You can also join their Slack and just like ping these guys directly. So if you're trying to sell to them, check out their Slack. You can message them directly. There's a free
spam us there.
You don't even need to use Clay. Right on. Thanks so much, guys. This is great. And thanks to everybody who's listening. We'll see you all next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Collin.
Cheers.